Hi, welcome back to Beats Learning. I'm Ben Davenport, and this is the show where we talk to the people behind the scenes in the music industry to find out what they actually do, how they got there, and what it's really like. There are so many careers in the music industry that most people never even hear about, and that's what this podcast is here to explore. The real stories, the honest advice, and a look at the jobs that keep the industry moving. Today I'm joined by someone whose work is absolutely vital to the artists and teams out front, but someone whose name you'll rarely hear shouted on stage. Mark Milsted is a chartered accountant who works with artists, labels and creatives to help them manage their money, stay tax compliant and build a sustainable future. We talk about what musicians often get wrong when managing their finances, what a good accountant actually does, and why creative people need more than just spreadsheets. They need support they can trust. This is Beats Learning. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying the show, please hit that like, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone who loves music or is trying to build a career in it. It really helps us grow and keep bringing on amazing guests like we have today. But now that's done, let me introduce Mark Milsted. So Mark, welcome to Beats Learning. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me in.
Absolute pleasure. So, look, I mentioned to you before, obviously, we started recording today. You are arguably probably one of the most important guests I've had on as of yet, but at the same time, probably one of the most hated. You are the accountant, the man with the money. But obviously, look, you are, and obviously, even looking at your social medias, you really focused on the accounting in the music space, hence why you're here today. And we're going to get into some fantastic sort of kind of advice from you later for up-and-coming artists and established artists and everything between. But something I always like to do first on this show is just try and understand where the love from music comes from. So where does the passion for music, where does that start in your life?
I think it starts right back to when I was a little kid, to be honest. I sort of have these vivid memories of, car trips down to see grandparents and listening to, my dad's old tapes. My dad was very into music. And so, he had a huge collection and was always playing the guitar. And so, yeah, sort of vivid memories of him playing the guitar, listening to tapes on the way down to grandparents, that kind of thing. And then just listening to music, it was always sort of something I kind of found myself drawn towards when I was growing up. When I was doing my homework and studying and that kind of thing. And I remember always listening to Judge Jules on, because I think it was Judge Jules had a radio show like every night at about 7 p.m. I think.
Yeah. Radio 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Radio 1, exactly. Yeah. And I just sort of remember listening to that pretty much every day.
Amazing.
And yeah, it kind of stemmed from there. I went off to uni and went to Sheffield, home of Gatecrasher. And the rest is history, if you like. But started going out to Gatecrasher a lot, and that kind of sort of the northern sort of club triangle, if you like, of Manchester and Sheffield and Leeds. And it was somewhere that really kind of felt like home, in a sense. And
the club itself.
The club, it was sort of a real kind of sense of belonging and kind of community. And I know community is sort of very popular now, and a lot of people are trying to kind of create these communities. And it was this community that existed and kind of was built. Not because anyone was trying to create it, just because it happened, very, very organically. And it was kind of, those clubs, whether it was Gatecrasher or Slinky or Cream or whatever, it was sort of, I always felt like it was kind of a group of people that, sort of misfits, if you like.
Love it.
That didn't necessarily feel like they kind of fitted in other places. And then they found this place. And they were like, yeah, this is a bit of me. And that was it. I've got friends now who I met at Gatecrasher, and they're some of the best friends of my life.
Absolutely,
And so, that sort of thread of music and the connection to music, but also connection to other people through music has been, sort of something that's been a constant through my life, really.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head. I know it's a very, very similar story for myself. Like even when I first moved to London, what really sort of kind of created my local friendship group was music. Started going out to Ministry of Sound and the various sort of kind of clubs around here. And I personally was massively into trance at the time. And from the sounds of Gatecrasher,
the gallery,
yeah,
Terminals.
absolutely, yeah, exactly that. And honestly, it was. I think we even. I don't want to be really cliche and sorry, world, but we were the Streatham trance family for a little bit of a while.
Okay.
But we won't bring that up again. But that was good fun. But it really is right, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about music is the fact that the pull it has for the. And I do like your word misfits because we all are. Let's be honest.
Well,
right?
it's a very sort of tribal kind of thing, and it's you see it. It's really interesting to sort of observe because obviously, I've sort of experienced it firsthand going to the clubs I went to and the kind of communities in there. But also, if you go to like a pop punk gig, you'll see everybody's dressed the same. Yeah. They've got the same kind of haircuts. If you go to a techno night, everyone's in black.
The old techno uniform. Yeah.
And it is a very sort of tribal thing, and it is a real kind of sense of sort of belonging to it. Everyone going to the Taylor Swift concerts, all glammed up and dressed up, and they're all wearing outfits and stuff. And it's being a part of it, and it's being with people, being somewhere that you feel sort of you fit in, and being with people that you feel are like you and get you. And I think that's a real big part of it, big part of the scene.
So look, I don't want to bounce about too much, but obviously you mentioned going to Sheffield University, and obviously you went to go do. Was it accounting? You actually went there to go do?
It was, yeah. It was accounting and financial management, and. I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I was sort of 17, 18 and I was picking the course, I was just thinking, well, accountants make good money, don't they? So I'll go and do that and I'll be an accountant. I didn't really, at 17, 18, I guess I didn't have a lot of kind of input in terms of, you could go and do this, you could do this. And so I just thought, well, I'll do something where I think I can get a decent job at the end of it. Was kind of the rationale. I just sort of wanted to go off to uni, really, and do that bit.
And from the sounds of it, uni's the thing that opened up your eyes and the world to music anyway, right?
It really, it did, in a big way. Yeah.
Go to school, kids, stay in school, do music. There we go. So, because you didn't have I say a traditional pathway, but you actually took a bit of a tangent at one point as well, didn't you? Because you actually become a PT, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. So it was, I was on the traditional pathway up to a point. So I did, accounting and financial management, and then I went and joined, a grad scheme at a big box accountancy firm, and was there for sort of about 5 years. And it just, didn't really feel like me, and decided then to pivot into personal training, which, again, I did for about sort of 5 years and had a great time. Found it very interesting. Fitness is still very much a part of my life, and it was.
We can see you're a beautiful man, Mark.
And I did a bit of kind of soul searching and reflecting and trying to figure out sort of what was important and what would be important in sort of 5 years and 10 years, and actually sort of think a little bit more into the future, which I suppose up to that point I probably hadn't done very much of. I was just kind of thinking of like
too young.
what I'm doing next year, and that was enough, right? And so, then I sort of started thinking about returning to accounting, and I had a client who was a music lawyer at the time. And I thought, okay, well, so there's music lawyers, so there must be music accountants. So I could go and I could do it just in music. And I felt that would give me, the sort of accounting side of it and the business side of it was like mentally stimulating, and kind of solving the puzzles of that. And then the music side of it gave it a real kind of emotional hook. And I felt that was what would sort of keep me entertained in a sense, and keep me into it, keep me interested and invested.
So let's say the second time around, then you knew that accounting was the career, but let's say the industry you wanted to be in was music. That was the pull for you back.
Exactly, yeah. And that was really it was a real kind of a decision to really do that and go on this path, rather than sort of previously when I'd chosen accounting, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do accounting, you know? So it was, there was a lot more kind of direction to it. And I think that made a big difference.
Because then that took you to Pel, if I'm not mistaken, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Pel Artists. So through this music lawyer client that I had at the time, she very kindly introduced me to Stephen Pel, who had set up Pel Artists. And he basically, he took a punt on a personal trainer who had done some accounting,
of course.
But also, was extremely passionate about music. And I was the first person he hired there, and then that sort of gradually grew while I was there over several years, and then I think after about 3 or 4 years, I think became iconic, and continued to grow really.
So when you get into somewhere like that, where do you start? Because I appreciate you've got your degree, you study, you can prove that you know the concept, you understand. But obviously then having 5 years out, and well done Stephen for obviously giving you a shot and boosting it, putting your career to where it is today essentially. But where do you start from that? Because obviously when you get into, and this might be me being naive, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're dealing with these entertainers who, some of them I'm sure are absolutely lovely, but then there's also some divas, and obviously having this, let's say, fresh face coming in. Where did that sort of position you to start with? Were you being thrown into it, into the deep end straight away? Was it a build up? How did that sort of kind of, let's say, first 6 months or a year work for you?
It was a reasonable learning curve. I would say. I mean, I had the kind of 5 years of experience previously in accounting, so it was still in there, and it just needed, a lot of it was kind of refresher sort of stuff, but as I kind of tried to, when I was sort of selling myself in the interview and so on, I really leaned into the fact that if you strip away accounting, so accounting, you've got the technical elements to it, and in fitness and nutrition, you've got technical elements to it, the technical element of a squat or a deadlift or whatever, and if you strip those things away, you've got a relationships business. Yeah. And it's about looking after the person and kind of reading the person a little bit. And, if you can learn technical stuff, so if you can learn accounting or you can learn fitness, you can learn nutrition, whatever, then, if you're good with people, you can apply that to just about anything. Yeah. And so that was kind of what I leaned into in the sort of the interview process, and what I also then sort of leaned into in working with the clients as well. And it's about understanding that although, a lot of the time as accountants, you're dealing with numbers on a page, behind those numbers, there's a person. Absolutely. And a person with hopes and dreams and a real life and maybe a mortgage and all sorts of stuff. And I think it's key to remember that. And, if you're a qualified accountant, if you're a chartered accountant or whatever, you definitely have the technical skills to be able to deal with this situation. Okay, there's nuance to it because it's in music. But the key is to remember that you're dealing with a person. Of course, absolutely, yeah. Do you feel that your passion for music helped in any way with that? Did it sort of find that common ground, or was it just your skills at rapport building that just sort of led you the way? I think the passion for music did help, because I think, basically every client I've worked with, I've gone and listened to their stuff, and I mean, they are all so talented. It's incredible. It's a really sort of it's a really sort of privileged position to be able to work with these artists who, like I said, are incredibly talented, and it has exposed me to far more music than I ever would have even found before otherwise, because you sort of get into your lane and kind of listen to a lot of the stuff that you would normally listen to. And it's really exposed me to new stuff. And I think the passion for music means that I can be genuinely enthusiastic about the stuff that they're doing. And, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, that sounds amazing, if I don't think it sounds amazing. But, I think it enables me to be authentic with that enthusiasm and the belief in the artist. Yeah. Okay. And I don't want to dive into too much from what you said there, but you mentioned obviously a few nuances between traditional accounting or specifically accounting for music. Can you elaborate on that? What, from someone who's been as a chartered accountant doing non-music and music, what are the big differences between the two? It's a good question. It's a question actually quite a few artists and managers and stuff tend to ask. Like, is there a difference between a high street accountant and a music accountant? And I think one of the main differences is a music accountant really sort of gets the artist's business. It understands the business in the same way that, I couldn't do the accounts and work for a property business. Yeah. Because I don't know anything about property.
Okay.
So, a property accountant is much more suited to that. And so it's sort of twofold, the benefits. One, it means that you can make sure you're taking advantage of every sort of opportunity there is for, claiming costs and tax reliefs and things like that a high street accountant might just not know about it because they don't deal with it all the time. And the other aspect of it is it means you can talk to the client on their level about their business in terms they understand and about things they understand. And they can say things to you that, are specific to the music business or touring or whatever. And you get it. Yeah. And I think that's really important for a client to be able to talk to you and feel like they're being understood and being heard.
So if, say, for example, someone was listening, hopefully someone's listening, but say someone's listening who, has that sort of kind of maths ability and is thinking, okay, this is actually a route that I could go down. They were potentially even thinking about being an accountant, but love music and obviously hearing this today. Is there anything that they can do to become a bit more familiar with them nuances, and maybe even to sort of kind of build on my question, your degree, was there separation for being more niche or specific, or is this sort of kind of taught outside of the university?
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing in the degree, no option in the degree for sort of anything to do with music.
Wow,
I hadn't known at the time. It never crossed my mind that being a music accountant was a thing, and that's sort of something that I am eager to kind of change because. Absolutely. I would have absolutely jumped at the chance when I was leaving uni. I could have jumped at the chance then, and not sort of pivoted a couple of times. Although I had a great time doing it, I won't take it back. But it hadn't even entered my head that I could sort of do it in as specific as specialise in music. And so there was nothing on the course. I mean, there will be sort of music business courses, I think, that kind of touch on some of this stuff. But if you're going and doing accounting at uni, and actually for anyone that's wanting to become accountant, I would think twice about going to uni.
Oh, really? Okay. Why is that?
I think the apprenticeship schemes are a really compelling alternative.
Fair.
Because you learn while you're doing the job. And honestly, I mean, I learned more doing the job. I learned more in the first 12 months of getting back into kind of music accounting than I did in the course or anything else, the kind of the theoretical side of stuff. And so I think, the apprenticeships offer a really compelling alternative because you learn while you're doing it, you're picking up experience, you're getting paid, you're not getting yourself, because I mean, uni now is expensive. Yeah. Fortunately, when I went, it was a good deal. Right. And so, if you could go and pay whatever it was I paid for uni, great. Yeah. But now what's 50 grand or something?
So, okay, so rather than people going to uni, they're going to go get their apprenticeships. Is there anyone, is there, what's the demand like for that though? Is this still a job that people want to get into? Are these apprenticeships widely available?
I mean, they should be fairly widely available. Accountancy firms are still hiring apprentices, as far as I know. In terms of how desirable they are, I think accounting's got a bit of a bad reputation. Yeah. It's got a reputation for being a bit boring. Right?
Fair. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay, some of it can be, but I think finding something or finding a niche like music. If you're really passionate about music, well then I think it makes it extremely interesting.
Yeah, of course.
And I think if more people knew that you could go and you could be an accountant in music, I think there would be more interest in it. And accounting is moving away from sort of what it used to be, and kind of AI and automation and stuff like that is going to do away with some of the sort of more boring tasks, I guess.
Okay.
Which then turns the role of the accountant much more into sort of an advisory role, and working with the client, working with the artist on a, like I said, on a more sort of advisory basis. And that's far more interesting, and you feel like you have a real impact. It's not just grinding out tax returns and accounts, which it is kind of boring, right? But it's this compliance element that needs doing and has to be taken care of, and you need someone with the expertise and the training to do that.
Okay, so you've been at Pel, you've been to uni, you've now found out, it works out that music is the way forward, and we'll come on to obviously the advice in a bit. So you've already said that arguably the better option is apprenticeships. And then from your own side of things, you've then taken what you've learned at Pel and now built Phoenix. What was the purpose of that? Was there a gap in the market you spotted, or is this just the next step for you?
Yeah, I think a bit of both, actually. I think it felt like the right next step for me, because it gives me an opportunity to do things my way and consistent with my values, and I think at the core of that is a focus on the people, and the people being external and internal. So colleagues and staff members, as well as the clients, and creating something that is sustainable in that sense. Because accounting again has this sort of a bit of a reputation for being sort of unsustainable in terms of number of people. There are just so many instances of people getting burnt out and overworked, and this lack of work-life balance, and I just don't think that's going to work going forwards. I mean, it sort of worked. It worked for my parents' generation, and it's mostly worked for my generation. But younger generations don't want that. Right? They don't want to just grind. And I think and believe, and maybe I'm being naive. We'll see. But I believe it until I'm proved wrong. I'm going to believe it that there's a better way, and we can all. We can turn up, we can do a good job, we can, appreciate what we've done, we can all get paid doing it and not kill ourselves in the process.
Yeah, of course.
Because I think that's quite important. Yeah. Like, if you're going to turn up and be somewhere for 40 hours, it's pretty important that it doesn't sort of suck the life out of you and make you dread going back in again.
Yeah, of course. Well, you say about the hours. How does it work for a music accountant? Because I appreciate you might have your own schedule, but obviously working with these people, touring or, being up late, how does that affect your hours and your commitment to them? How does that play in your day to day?
So, I mean, there are sort of the core kind of working hours, core sort of office hours, but there is an understanding that if there's some sort of emergency, and it's usually something to do with a payment.
Of course, always.
It's always kind of money related. We have steps and processes in place to try to avoid, instances where there is some sort of emergency and someone's left high and dry with no money. That's obviously the last thing we want. I don't want to be getting a call at 11 p.m. on a Friday night because someone's got no money in their account. I want to have seen that that's going to happen beforehand and dealt with it and made sure everything's in place. So while trying to keep fairly sort of core hours, core business hours, and set some boundaries and kind of protect that, there is an understanding that sometimes you just have to fix the problem, you have to deal with it, and maybe an artist has got a gig somewhere and the promoters saying that they need some certificate, otherwise they're not going to let them on stage. You just have to deal with it and get it, make sure the show goes on, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that's kind of accepted. But those things, I think with the right processes and systems and structure, you can avoid most of those things. Okay. There are always going to be emergencies, but you can kind of mitigate.
So prevention is the cure. Make sure you've got the stuff done first.
Absolutely,
so the late nights don't happen.
Yeah.
But saying that, I'm assuming obviously being, if you're doing a good job, probably not the most hated person, probably the most loved person. You're the man that's making sure there's money in the account.
Hopefully, hopefully the most loved, not the most hated.
Absolutely, well, if you're doing your job right. And has that led, and obviously this is digressing slightly away from your core job, but has that led to some really cool like opportunities, like going to events or seeing your clients here? What's something that stands out to mind? And obviously you don't have to mention any names.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely going to the events is. That's one of the real sort of pulls of the job, right? That's
ignore the money. I just want the free tickets.
Kind of why I'm doing it, in a sense, because it's seeing people who are extremely talented and really good at what they do, doing the thing that they're really good at and that they love, and seeing a whole different side of them than the side you see when you're on a Zoom call going through, their last month's kind of financial performance and this sort of stuff. And it's really interesting seeing the difference or like the complete transformation between some of these artists on a call where it's not their kind of it's not where they feel they're most comfortable.
Of course, yeah, fair.
And obviously we try and make them as comfortable as possible, but then seeing them on stage and it's like a completely different person. It's incredible. Seeing
the real persona come through.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that happens a lot, often, that they're very two different people?
Yeah, it's a real, I think, looking at sort of the financial stuff. I mean, getting into anything to do with money, especially for British people, is quite a vulnerable sort of thing. It's quite a vulnerable topic and subject, and you sort of feel quite exposed. And I think it's outside the comfort zone of a lot of the people I work with, but that's exactly why they need me to work with them, because they don't feel comfortable doing it, and maybe we'll scrap some of that.
No, you're good. So how do you find then? How do you kind of find your balance between that sort of personal and professional then? Obviously, let's be honest, going to an event is sort of very personal moment, right? It's emotional. You love music, you're in it. But obviously you've always got that sort of kind of accountant's hat on. Do you find that's hard to navigate, or is it...
I don't think so. You're right that there is sort of a line and it is a balance between kind of personal and professional. I think, I'm not sort of going to their shows and getting absolutely off my face in the green room. I think, I'm also getting on in years. So I'm more sensible now than I was when I was 20. So that's a good thing. But no, I don't think there is too much of a challenge with kind of balancing the two. And I think, being able to be yourself is important, and it's important for that relationship, because, well, otherwise it's sort of inauthentic, and it will, seem like an act and so on, and seem uncomfortable.
Absolutely. So, and have you found that's kind of taught you lessons about how to perhaps not only manage your own expectations, but even the clients as well? And even coming back to your point about earlier, you doing your job properly, hopefully there won't be that late night call. But at the same time, let's be honest, there's some people out there, I'm sure if they want to call you, they'll just call you. How do you go about sort of kind of making sure that you do have that sort of kind of line and manage that expectation of the clients?
I think it's just about sort of setting out the boundaries from the beginning and making it clear sort of what you're available for and what you're not and what your hours are and that kind of thing. And that, like I said, if there is some sort of emergency, well then, we'll fix it. Don't worry.
Absolutely, yeah.
But, broadly speaking, these are the hours and so on. And, if you want to email, then you can get a response. If it's really urgent, then, hit me up on WhatsApp. But I don't think I've had too many problems with clients sort of overstepping boundaries in that sense.
But obviously knowing how important your role is, and kind of once again coming back, and I don't want to keep jumping on this, but I think it's such a great point about sort of kind of making sure you've done your job correctly and in time, so that the the repercussions aren't there, or the consequences of not doing it aren't there. But how does the pressure of that, how does it sort of kind of impact you? How do you go about managing that pressure? Because arguably, as I say, you arguably are the most important person in this, right?
Well, I'd like to think I'm reasonably important. So how do I manage the pressure? I think, again, it's coming back to sort of systems and processes, and that's kind of a lot of what accountancy and accountants are kind of built on is systems and processes. And having those in place, it takes the pressure off. and sort of alleviates some of that. I mean, in terms of sort of managing, I guess, how I deal with pressure, exercise is a big one. I've gotten into meditating recently.
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I've got this meditation app, and I listen to the meditation thing, and I lie down, and it's quite nice.
yeah. It's basically just having a little nap, and then
I mean, it seems to do the trick.
Yeah.
So I think managing stress is very important, and that goes back to sort of the point I made about people feeling burnt out and that kind of thing, and that's just an accumulation of too much stress and not enough sort of balance. And I think something I have sort of identified or something I've been working on is trying to keep that balance.
Okay.
It's something I'm still working on, but it's important for myself. It's important. Well, it's important for everyone. It's important for artists to do the same as well. They've got to manage the stresses of going on tour and writing albums and all of that. So.
Well, I think that's a beautiful segue, right? I think I've drilled you enough about your role and how you got there, and thank you for that. I think now's the time to really come on to try and give some real world advice. And you obviously mentioned about the artists themselves. Let's be honest, right? There really are, and we kind of actually had a quick brief chat about it before we started recording. There's that sort of kind of start-up artist, and there's that superstar artist, and there's really kind of this grey area in the middle where no one knows what's going on. Let's start with the up-and-coming artists. Hopefully, I'd like to think they're probably going to be the people that listen to this most. Day one, starting artists, what are the people that you've seen doing right and what are they doing wrong? I know that's a very broad question.
Good question. So this is sort of the gap that kind of the gap that I'm hoping to try and sort of bridge between the kind of the startup artist and the established artist, if you like, because there's a point at which an artist starts doing something. And they're a business, and if you're receiving income for providing some sort of service or good, and you're receiving more than £1,000 of that, well, you need to be registered for self-assessment, and HMRC sees you as a business. So you kind of need to get on the same page and treat yourself as a business. But that's kind of a long way from being able to pay someone X amount a month to look after all your kind of bookkeeping and accounting and everything else. So how do we bridge that gap? Well, the absolute number one thing I would recommend is set up a separate bank account, separate business bank account that is separate from your personal bank account, and have everything, all the income and all the costs and expenses for your sort of business going through that separate bank account.
Sorry, just taking one quick step back, and sorry to interject there, Mark. Obviously, we're talking about this separate bank account and treating it as a business. Would you recommend people that are serious about actually establishing a limited business or a sole trader or something like that, or literally just a separate account that they can pretend? What would you do?
Yeah, just a separate account. So if we think of the artist who's kind of it's starting out and they're just kind of they're making a little bit of money and it's kind of a side thing. Keep it as simple as possible for as long as possible. Is how I like to sort of approach stuff, because as soon as you start incorporating, setting up a limited company, you've got all sorts of obligations then.
Of course.
You can't, and I think a lot of times people don't realise that they have these obligations. There's an obligation to file a set of accounts with Companies House, to file a corporation tax return with HMRC, and there's all sorts of stuff going on.
I know I had a random email the other day from the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. So it's like saying, we see you've got a business, and the only reason, to be honest with you, the only reason I do it, and something I'll talk about to the world and another time, I'm building a careers fair, and obviously one of the main areas I'm focusing that on is the students. So I've got to get a DBS check, naturally. I'm fine, don't worry. But to do that, you have to be sponsored by a company. So it's just like, well, there's no company responsibility, so I've got to do that to get that, and there's a lot of knock-on sort of kind of domino effect, really. And the next thing you've got Companies House emails, you've got this, you've got accountants, you've got this, and it's just crazy for essentially what is a non-existent business right now. But the actual requirements is just absolutely chaotic. So sorry, coming back, so keep it as simple as possible, but also keep your money separate.
Absolutely, keep it separate from your sort of personal money, your grocery shopping and your Netflix subscription and whatever, because then it just makes it so much easier. I cannot tell you the difference it makes. And it means that, if you get an accountant to help you with your tax return, you just send them the stuff from the business account.
Yeah.
You don't send them all your personal I don't want to see what you're spending your money on. All your personal transactions. Don't need to see that. Right? And so separate business bank account, and then to level that up a little bit more, create. Most of these online bank accounts now, you can create sort of pots and sub accounts within them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tax account, tax savings. Every time you get some income in, move some over to the tax savings account, 10 to 20% of everything that comes in. And that should mean that when it comes time to pay your tax bill, you've got some money there to pay your tax bill, which means no surprises, no panic, no suddenly having to figure out, oh, hang on, where do I get the money to pay this tax bill that I hadn't really thought about? It's
probably good advice for everyone, let alone just
it is good advice for everyone, but especially artists.
So obviously, taking it one step back though, so a lot of artists these days, let's be honest, right? One of the main reasons, people set up businesses is to try and write things off, right? And that might be me just being naive, but when Christ, if you're a producer, you buy a new laptop, it's probably a couple of £1,000, there's VAT on that. Obviously, you buy a microphone, you buy a bit of this, bit of kit, all right. The next thing you know, you spend quite a bit of money, a lot of VAT. Where do you see, and obviously I appreciate this might differ for people, but where do you see that point of now's the time to actually think about having a limited partnership, or a limited business, should I say, to be able to go, let's see if we can start clawing some of this money back off the tax man, and where is there a line that you think, okay, now's the time to move over? Or how does it work like that?
It depends, and it is sort of a case by case basis. Broadly speaking, if you've got a business that's generating, 50K profit or more, then it is probably a little bit more tax efficient to set up a limited company. There's, over the years, HMRC have really kind of eroded the sort of the tax benefits of having a limited company. The dividend allowance is now down to 500 quid. So, you're not sort of saving much there. You can save money, by paying yourself with dividends from a limited company, but the company has to pay corporation tax first. There's really not much in it in terms of kind of take home for the individual. When it comes to sort of writing off costs and expenses, you could write off the cost of a laptop through as a sole trader. You could still take that. The VAT would be treated as a cost if you're not VAT registered. If you are VAT registered, then obviously you're doing VAT returns and you're reclaiming that. But again, unless you're at unless you've crossed the threshold, the income threshold of 90K, it probably isn't worth registering for VAT. There are instances where it might be. But it probably isn't. So, there's not sort of a one size fits all approach. It would be, you'd look at the individual, look at their situation, look at what is planned for the next 12 months, perhaps, what's on the horizon. Certainly if they're talking to record labels and publishers and things like that, and there's potentially an advance on the horizon, you would probably go ahead and set up a limited company, because that advance could well sort of take you up over kind of that thresholds. It could take you up into kind of a higher tax bracket. So you would want to sort of shield that a little bit with a limited company.
Okay, so you've got the artists, they've started making a little bit of money, and let's be honest, right, an emerging artist, having no money is probably your best friend. How would you go about actually budgeting then? Is there a method behind that? Is it, let's to throw it over to you, what would your advice be to someone who's got a low income, they're doing their part-time job to keep things afloat, but obviously then trying to pursue their music career? Is there any advice for someone like that?
I think keeping costs as low as you can is advisable. Obviously, you're going to need to spend some money on sort of music production and getting out there and so on. But trying to keep your overheads down as much as you can. I think like I said, having the separate bank account means that you can kind of see everything much more clearly than if it's all mixed in with your personal stuff.
Absolutely,
so you can, and some of these banks have their own kind of, they show you the breakdown of what you're spending and so on. I think if you wanted to get more control over everything and more sort of visibility on what's going on, you would want to invest in some accounting software.
Okay.
Obviously, I think accounting software is great because I can use it and I'm used to using it. I've been using it for, best part of 10 years. If I was going to invest in any accounting software, it would be Xero.
Okay.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Fair. Okay. Why is that?
Just ease of use.
Yeah.
It is so much easier to use than any of the others.
Fair. Okay.
And you've got all sorts of integrations that you can have going on, and you set up the bank feed, everything goes into Xero, it's all there. You have to kind of keep on top of it, otherwise it can get into a bit of a mess, and then it's not the advantage that you would want it to be. But if you do that, then you can see exactly what you're spending your money on. You can review where it's going.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because it's especially over time, and everyone kind of, I think, has experienced this. One subscription here, one subscription there. Like, you don't even notice these things one by one. And then before you know it, you've got like 250 quid every month in subscriptions and various things, right? And so I think it's important to be able to kind of review that stuff and potentially review it more than just sort of once a year when you're doing your taxes, and because the focus then is on getting your tax return done and paying it, and you're probably not paying too much attention to actually what else is going on.
So when you're looking at something like that, are there any sort of kind of general misconceptions that you have seen that seem to be more common than others for people to watch out for, just generally when managing their money or looking for things like that?
So the one that has come up quite a few times, actually.
Okay.
It's this idea of sort of trying to pay less tax.
Okay.
Which obviously paying less tax is good, right? But I think it's sort of, it becomes a bit kind of too binary. And, paying less tax is good, but at what cost?
Okay.
Because if you wanted to pay no tax, or if you end up in a position where you're paying no tax, that's because you've made no profit. Okay. You want to make profit. Profit's good, because if you want to buy a house or you want to have any money to spend on anything, you need your business to be profitable. Okay. So that you can take a salary or pay yourself dividends, etc. So you're going to have to pay some tax. Okay. And so the thing that kind of comes up is when people are sort of trying to figure out what they should spend money on to pay less tax. Okay. And I've had this conversation with quite a few people where they want to spend the money to pay less tax. But I then sort of saying, well, is there anything that you need to buy for the business? Or are you just doing it to pay less tax? Yeah. Because if there's stuff you need to buy, you've got cash in the business, you've got there's ample cash in the business to buy a new laptop or a new mixer or whatever. Do you need one? Do you want one? Or are you just doing it to pay less tax? Because what's the goal here?
And the thing is, only a percentage of what you spend is to taxable.
Well, yeah,
anyway,
of course,
right?
Exactly. So it's I think, and that kind of ties into something that I sort of quite like. Conversation I quite like having with people is about goal setting, and talking about goals. And it's what is the goal? And I think it's really important to figure out what your goal is, because then every decision you make, you can tie it back to this goal. Okay. You can go, my goal is to build as much wealth for myself as possible. Is this decision going to, contribute to that or detract from that? Yeah. So is buying a new mixer going to ultimately build more wealth or not? And if your old mixer's knackered and broken, well then, probably you should invest in some new kit, right? But if your current mixer's fine and you're thinking about buying a new one because it means you'll pay less tax, well, that's not really. It's not going to give you more wealth because you'll have spent $3,000 on the mixer. So I think that's one of the most common things that sort of comes up is this idea of sort of spending money with the goal of paying less tax. but actually, really, the goal is to have more money at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I'd like to think. Once again, it depends on your goal,
It
right?
might not be, right? So that's why I think it's important just to kind of think about, what am I trying to achieve? What's the goal? Where am I trying to get to?
Yeah.
And is this decision I'm making going to get me closer to or further away from that goal?
Do you think then and once again, I might just be shooting from the hip here, but it sounds like some of the decisions or choices that are made in some way are a little bit naive. You know, as you say, they're trying not to do this, but actually it's more detrimental to them by spending the money than what it would be to pay a little bit of tax. You know, is there sort of kind of, when you're talking to these people about goal setting, you know, how would you position it to them so that they're clear and they know exactly what they want, so that then they can justify or build these decisions around that? You know, how would you go about, let me take the question back. You're sitting with a new client right now. How would you approach that conversation? What would be, let's say, the question that you would ask that would get them thinking about it? Or would it be as simple as, what's your goal?
Yeah, so I think you know, you can start with a what's your goal, but unless someone has already spent some time really thinking about that, they're probably not going to have an answer.
Yeah, fair.
And it also it depends as well on kind of how long you've known the person and what the relationship's like, because sharing your kind of your goals and stuff, again, is quite a sort of vulnerable sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So you can start with the what's your goal, and then, you know, try to drill down a layer by asking them why, and the sort of the principle of 5 whys, and it's, you know, this idea of, you know, ask why 5 times, and then you'll really get to what it is, and you know, most people, they want to be able to buy a house, and they want to be able to, you know, retire at a certain age and this sort of thing, and so some of these things I think you won't necessarily get at the very beginning, but as the relationships develops and the trust develops, and that's absolutely key to it, then, you know, people will start to kind of be a bit more kind of open and honest with some of this stuff, and I think then you can really sort of it provides a real direction to some of the decision making.
So realistically, let's say, for example, an emerging artist is sitting down looking at their future, their next 5 years. Obviously, they're too small to get an accountant at this stage. They should say, what is my goal? And then ask themselves 5 times. Is that sort of kind of a general overview of how to make it simple? Like, I know what I'm trying to go understand is if someone's really wanting to have this honest conversation, like, let's be honest, right? We're all the victim to this. I don't think a lot of us are honest with ourselves in what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do things. Yeah. And so actually being able to sit down and break it down when you haven't got anyone to have that conversation with, and you are just trying to do it on your own. I'm just trying to sort of kind of give them a lecture, kind of a bit of a how-to. So, sit down and ask yourself these questions. When you've got that answer, that's when you know what to build on. You know, if you was doing it for yourself, and having that conversation, you know, what would you be asking yourself? How would you position it to yourself?
I would probably give some thought to what I wanted my life to look like.
Okay, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah,
and I mean that's you know, a sort of, I guess, part of the process I've gone through in you know, setting up Phoenix, is thinking, you know, what do I want my life to look like, you know, in the short term, but also longer term, and so on. And okay, you know, that's what I want it to look like. Then, what is it? You know, what are the steps? What are the milestones to get to that, and what do I need to do to get to that point? And I think that's kind of key to it, really, is figuring out what you want your life to look like, and then working back from that, and then setting yourself up to hit those milestones.
Fair. So is there anything you would tell people actively don't do? You know, are there any, no, we're trying to help people go, right, okay, I need to budget, I need to separate my money. I think that's a great piece of advice. Now we're trying to build on sort of kind of how they position themselves and how to spend their money appropriately. But is there anything they definitely shouldn't do?
I would say definitely don't just put your head in the sand.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Don't get, you know, freaked out by it and think, oh, I don't know what to do about this. I think it's a problem. I'm just going to ignore it and hope it goes away, because it probably won't go away, unfortunately. And that's true for, VAT or, income tax or corporation tax. I've seen and worked with various clients who have, they come to us and they've just, maybe they've never filed a tax return because they just didn't know. Right. And it's a very sort of genuine position. And, maybe they've crossed the VAT threshold and they just didn't know. No one's ever told them and they weren't aware. And so all of these things can be sorted out. And I think that's really important to remember is it can all be sorted out. It will all be fine. But don't put your head in the sand because it's not going to go away. It's going to take some, there are going to be some deliberate steps involved in getting it sorted out. And it might be a little bit painful at times, but it will all be fine. And I think that's the kind of key takeaway is, don't just sort of hide from this stuff and don't think you don't need to do it and it'll go away because it won't. And you're just going to create more stress and more anxiety for yourself. And nobody needs that.
Oh, cool, absolutely not. So let's say you've got a new client then, and I know I've been really digging into this. So I apologise. I'm just I'm in finance myself, so I'm incredibly curious, right? So a client comes to you. They've finally got to that size, that state, whatever that size where they're like, right, okay, I can justify spending a bit of money, getting a proper accountant to do this for me. You've now got this new client, you're looking at their books or whatever. Are there any sort of kind of red flags that stand out to you? You go, oh dear, something's happened here. As an accountant, I'm sure it's very similar in many roles, right? But for you, like anything that kind of was just like, oh dear, you should have done that.
Any real red flags? I'm trying to think. I'm sure there have been. I can't think of anything specific. I can't. Any real kind of red flags?
We'll keep it as someone's just spent all their money. There we go. That's a red flag. You got no money left.
There is. I mean, there's one, and maybe this shouldn't go in the thing.
Do you find that though, like the richer people get, and when they start getting this like little bit of sort of kind of fame or whatever it is, that just things go out the window and they stop like thinking sensibly? Is that something that happens often?
I haven't seen that as kind of a pattern. I think it is a very individual thing.
Yeah, fair.
I've worked with clients who are making loads of money and spending loads of money.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I've worked with clients who are making hardly any money and spending all of it as well. Okay. And then there are also clients who are making ranges of income and they're not spending it in the same way. It really is a very sort of individual kind of thing. But I think, especially where you have artists sort of signing to a major, doing a major deal, and potentially getting quite a big advance, and it's more money than they will have ever seen in their life, and more money than most of us would ever see in one go in our lives potentially, and I think that can be quite intoxicating.
Absolutely, yeah. And
especially if it's someone who hasn't grown up with sort of financial like a financial education, that sort of thing. Or to be honest, even if they have, it's suddenly you've got more money. It looks like a number that will never run out. And
but it does.
You're thinking amazing, but then the reality is that potentially has to last a year, 2 years. Who knows? And who knows what will happen in 2 years' time? Maybe you'll renew a deal. Maybe you'll get something else. Maybe you won't. Maybe something will have gone wrong. So it's really important to be able to try and make that money last. Actually, and figure out. Look at how much money have I got? How long do I need it to last? Probably. Right. Rather than think, I've got a huge pot of money. I've made it. I'm rich. That's it. I'm done. Because if you're 21 years old, there's quite a lot of life left.
Of course.
Right. And so.
Yeah. And so as an accountant then, obviously taking that situation, would you sort of kind of add a bit more on? You said obviously about that it needs to last, say, for argument's sake, let's say 6 months. As an accountant, would you budget 9? Is that sort of just something that you would do personally just to prepare for the worst, so to speak? Is that, is that something that you would advise?
I mean, we would look at what what the planned expenditure is over that period, over sort of 6 months, 9 months, 12 months,
Yeah.
And see what that is in terms of a monthly spend and how much of that is being used up, and there'll be a kind of a bit of a contingency in there, but essentially, we would look at what the kind of expectation is, what the activity is expected to be over the, say, 6 months, 12 months period, see what that is and see if that fits into the pot of money.
Absolutely.
If if we think it might run out here, then we speak to the management and say, okay, you're going to need to find something to sort of plug this gap.
Yeah,
right?
fair.
And that would be it. You could look at sort of a couple of scenarios and say, oh well, we think this is going to happen. We think this is going to happen. But it depends on what the margin is like. So if their expenditure is pretty lean, and it's not a concern, they're not going to run out, then fine. But if they're going to be kind of close to the wire, well, then you look at you dig into it a bit deeper and you kind of look at it more closely and figure it out.
So obviously you mentioned a second ago, you were talking about the sort of, let's say, your more established clients, right? And you've got the ones that make a shit ton of money but then spend it all, and vice versa, etc. Are there any sort of behaviours or patterns with the ones that have been incredibly financially clever that can be adopted by artists earlier on in their career?
I think, generally speaking, I think it is, or they would sort of approach it with an air of sort of calmness.
Okay.
I think. Is that really a pattern I've seen?
Or is there any, maybe to change the question, are there any sort of good traits or good things that people generally do that helps them make sure, so like whether it be, and I'm just throwing examples out, but whether it's a case of making sure, right, every time they get paid, their percentage goes away to a savings pot or into an investment or whatever it might be, rather than, as we say, just like going out and just spending it willy-nilly on whatever they might be. As I say, is there, even taking away from patterns, is there anything that you generally do advise people to do in that situation? They've started earning some money. How should they break that down? I know I've personally seen, this isn't related to music, but like, right, okay, you never spend more than sort of like 30% on your house, 10% on a car, that type of thing. Is there any sort of kind of general pattern or behaviour there that you, or things to do that would help people as they grow?
So there's an approach called profit first, which I quite like using with some clients, and essentially it's like a digital version of the old school kind of envelope method of budgeting. Okay. So you have, we mentioned kind of bank accounts earlier. You have your income account, and then you have separate accounts for things like operations, commissions, tax savings, owner's pay, and profit. And every time some money comes into the income account, you siphon off X percent to each of these accounts. And it takes a little bit of setting up to see what percentages should I have in different places. Maybe you want 30% going to operations and 20% obviously is going to commissions, and you get that all set up. And what that means is you've got a very kind of real-time image of sort of where the business is and what money you've got available for certain things. So that sort of sets the groundwork and sets the structure, and says, okay, well, if you've got this much money in the operations account, you can spend this much money on stuff for the business, of course, whatever that may be, fair. Right? And maybe it's on touring or whatever. The next sort of step of that is the discipline to not spend more than that. Yeah, fair. Because it's all well and good saying, okay, well, here's what you've got to spend on operations. Yeah. Here's what you've got to take for yourself. Here's your sort of profit. Here's your savings. But if you're constantly overspending on one of these things, and you're dipping into the savings or you're dipping into the profit because money's building up there, well, then that's not really how it's supposed to work. I mean, it's a bit like having any budget. So you can can have the most precise and wonderful budget in the world, but actually, if you're not tracking the expenditure against the budget and seeing if you're kind of on target or over or under, well, then what's the point? It's a wasted exercise, right? So, it's a couple of layers to it. One is essentially having the budget, but you can do it in the form of this profit first method. There's a book, so anyone that's interested can go and either listen to it or read the book.
Your book?
It's not my book. No, it's not my book. Unfortunately, I wish I'd written that book. But
what was the book called, sorry?
Profit First.
Profit First. Okay, go get it. Go get a copy of it. Okay, so I think we've discussed enough when you've got the money that, what to do, especially, making sure you keep it segregated, make sure you budget, and let's be honest, be disciplined, I think is probably one of the biggest keys there, right? Everything means nothing if you're not following through and actually doing what you've committed to. A big question that I do have, and obviously coming on to the next segment, is where does money come from in music? And I know once again that's very, very broad. And I had a guest, Tom Allen, the CTO from Downtown on a little while ago, and obviously his company Curve, which does all royalty accounting, and he gave a very quick overview. I wonder maybe if you can give us an overview again, whether just on royalties or just generally, where does an artist make their money?
I mean, for the most part, an artist makes most of their money from touring, really. And it'll depend a little bit on sort of what kind of an artist they are and the music they're making will determine how much they're getting from royalties. But, they will be receiving income from sort of the collection agencies, PRS and PPL. But the bulk of it really comes from touring, from live. And then as an add-on to that, merchandise. Selling merch at shows and selling merch online. Sometimes the merch business can be as big as the rest of the business, to be honest. And so touring, I mean, during the pandemic when people weren't touring, that was a real tough time for artists because basically their income went from whatever it was to virtually zero, a lot of them. And then, I mean, the knock-on effect of that onto sort of the wider ecosystem is also pretty severe. But most of the income, I would say, comes from touring. They make some money from royalties. I mean, the artists I've worked with, and again, it depends. It depends on the artist because the more sort of niche an artist is, the less the royalties are going to be because it's not getting play on the radio. It's not getting play. On Spotify, if you've got someone who, maybe they make, like Afro house or deep house or something, and they're playing loads of DJ gigs and getting paid well from that, but their music's not doing a great deal. So it really sort of depends on the artist.
Obviously, you're getting a lot of, and we'll come on to touring. So I think in essence that's its own thing to talk about budgeting and everything like that. We'll come on to that shortly. But with regards to sort of the royalties, one of the big things we've seen lately, obviously following sort of kind of Taylor Swift's buyout, let's say, or however you want to put it, of requiring her catalogue back, is this whole own your own records. Now, let's be honest, right? Unless you really are completely self-releasing, and obviously there are systems out there like AWOL and things like that for to help artists get their music out independently. But at the same time, sometimes if you haven't got that audience, you do need the record label because they're the one that's bringing the audience to you in many, many ways.
Well, they're just such a big marketing machine.
Well, exactly,
major record labels are. They're huge marketing machines, and that's what it is. That's what they're kind of really bringing to the table. In my eyes, is the marketing and the reach. And if you want potentially global reach, the majors sort of do that better than anyone else. But obviously there are great advantages of being an independent artist.
Of course,
control over your art and so on, and the assets that you produce.
So where do you find out the sort of strike of the balance is then? Because obviously early days, I'd like to think go with a label, help build your audience, get the feedback as well, right? You know, they're going to have the A&R, they're going to have all that, they're going to help and coach you, right? You know, last month's episode was Miles Shackleton, the COO of Tour Room, you know, and what he was talking about, artist development and things like that. You know, you're not going to get that if you're on your own. But obviously the sacrifice then is, you know, if you have made a track that is getting things like radio play, then naturally, yes, your royalties are going to be split left, right and centre. In
terms of, you know, signing to a label and giving over your rights, and you know, you mentioned Taylor Swift and her buying back her music, and really kind of owning the music. I think the thing is when you're an artist, when you're creating assets,
absolutely,
essentially,
yeah.
And these assets have the potential to earn revenue ad infinitum. They can be earning revenue long after you're gone, and I think that's why there's such a sort of focus on that now, is because people are really sort of appreciating what these assets can be worth, even 40 years into the future.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's it's not just for you, but for your estate and everything else and beyond. And so I think there is a lot of value in retaining that ownership for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I would suggest that if you can, don't let anyone else have it. At least if you're going to have a good lawyer to negotiate it. And I think having a major label to do your marketing is great.
Yep.
You could achieve an awful lot with a great manager.
Okay.
And
makes sense.
And I think that sort of ties into an idea of, for artists, it's incredibly important to have the right team around you, and have a good team that is, supporting you and supporting what you're doing, and really, on the same side. And, the manager is obviously a key part of that. You've got the manager, you've got a label, you've got the lawyer, and you've got the accountant. And you've got a booking agent in there as well, the one that's getting the shows. And I think with all of that in place, then you're sort of set up quite well. You should be okay. Yeah, that's where the money is going to come from, and the manager will get you into the right rooms and get you deals, whether it's record deal, publishing deal. The agent will get you bookings. The lawyer makes sure you're not getting screwed. And the accountant makes sure that the money comes in and is dealt with in a tax efficient way, and looks after that, and that the right people get paid and you get paid and so on.
So is that, I've seen how the, let's say, perception of owning your own assets. Obviously, I think, let's be honest, Taylor Swift really has led the way. I think we've started seeing, I've seen a couple of other artists that have been doing it recently. Do you think that's the way the world is heading? Let's be honest, I know the whole growth of independent artists have come up, and obviously there's always going to be an argument whether they're independent because their music's crap, or whether they just want to actually go down that route. But that's a completely different conversation. But from your experience as an accountant, are you seeing this more and more? Is it something that is growing?
I think it is, because I just think there are so many more avenues that you can go down to kind of get your music out there.
Of course.
I've worked with an artist who he eventually did sign with a major, I think, but he built up a huge following on YouTube. And it wasn't the sort of the traditional route and standard route, and he was earning money on YouTube, and then Amazing. That sort of transferred then into an audience that would come and see him perform and this kind of thing. And I think there are just so many, especially now with social media, there's so many routes.
Sorry to jump. You jumped on the question that literally I was going on to next, and that was how artist income has changed with the era of social media. Obviously, as you say about the touring, they don't even need to do that anymore now, right? You can make a lot of money by taking a video of yourself indoors and just having followers. Let's be honest, right? That's kind of where the world is going, and you are seeing a lot more artists building their own personal brand, and as horrible as to see, you are seeing, I'm very conscious of how I put this, but there are, some influencers who have made a phenomenal personal brand, but I actually don't know really what they're doing. So when they're getting booked, let's be honest, it's rather disappointing. And I'm not going to go into any of that. But the point is actually...
No, please do.
No, don't put me on the spot. I'm the host. But no, the point is, right, it's like that it is a whole nother avenue that actually can get rid of needing to release in many, many ways, because let's be honest, copyright, as soon as it's recorded, it's copyrighted in theory anyway, right? Let's be honest, if you're recording on something on TikTok, they're not exactly going to be DJing the clubs, but ultimately you're an independent artist in a way, right? You've released it, just your medium is through social media. And as I say, you can build, are you seeing that a lot more yourself, or is that not the type of artist that you go with as well? Maybe there's a two-part question there.
I think, I've definitely obviously sort of witnessed the kind of growth of the importance of social media and the emphasis that is being put on social media by, whether it's by labels or by agents or whoever. The social media numbers are important.
Of course.
And I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's a massive opportunity there, potentially for some. I think it's a real sort of burden for others.
Yeah.
And I know there are artists out there who they want to focus on the art. They don't want to be a social media influencer.
Can't agree more. Yeah.
They don't. They accept that they have to do some of this stuff, and they do it, but at the same time, then they're seeing, there are other people who are hammering the social media thing because they enjoy it, it comes naturally, whatever.
Absolutely.
Right? And then it feels like, the art and stuff that you're producing as an artist isn't being valued as highly as just being on the screen all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's a very interesting sort of point. And like I said, for some, it's a great opportunity. And for others, it's a real burden that sort of, I think, is causing a lot of kind of anxiety and stress. And I think it's a real shame.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, especially artists who sort of have kind of spanned the period before social media now are in this period of social media dominance.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for them, it's a tremendously difficult sort of transition because they're sort of a bit like a fish out of water.
Absolutely,
and it's sort of, it's kind of, I think it can be sort of hard to wrap your head around of like, what's important here and like why, what are we trying to do? Like,
crappy videos.
But to see artists who are sort of struggling with it and not enjoying it and feel like it's a burden is like, I think it's a bit of a shame. And I don't know what the answer is to that, unfortunately. But
well, the thing is, right, I suppose it's across multiple areas in the industry, right? And obviously, we were talking even about touring, and let's be honest, there's always been, my background's electronic music, very similar to yourself from the sounds of it, and there's always been that, are you a producer or a DJ argument, right? And let's be honest, if you're a DJ, great. You're the one that wants to be out in public a bit more and doing that, and that's where you're making the money. But to do that, you've got to do the insular, sitting indoors, grinding over some door or whatever it is, trying to make a track that's good enough to be released so you get the better gigs and actually make money.
Pay someone else to do it.
Well, but the concept's the same, right? We're not ghost producing for today or sound engineering. That's another conversation. But the point is, it's still something that in theory you should be doing. And then you've got the other sides of the coin, right? If you're a phenomenal producer, but actually the only way you're going to make money is by being out in public DJing, which might not even be something that you want to do or can do. And the next thing you know, you're being taken the piss out of, or someone's putting you down because you've got a pre-mixed set, or something very, very simple. And it really coming back to the social media thing. If you are a bit more introverted, and your talent and your focus and your passion is making the music, but then you've got this necessary evil. And so I don't want to get too far into this because this is a conversation that does get brought up in most episodes, because it is so important. Sadly,
but it's kind of a hot topic, and it really is, you can't escape it. It's in your face all the time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. It's a tricky one, and for the ones that like it, great. And for the ones that don't, I mean, I'm trying to do my own sort of bits of social media and sort of battling with that, and I'm like, well, you know what, I accept it, and I'll sort of have a go, but I wouldn't say I'm a natural.
Well, I'll be honest, I would beg to differ, mate. I've been on your page, just so that everyone's clear, and I completely forgot to mention this, at The Music Accountant. What a brilliant tag. I love it.
I can't believe it was available.
So what are you doing? And obviously I appreciate this is a little bit off topic, but what are you trying to do there to build your own brand and try and help artists out there?
So I think the social media account is, again, it's about sort of trying to bridge this gap between the artist who's just starting out and you know, getting to a point where they're a bit more established and going on. And I think a lot of that, you know, in terms of reaching as many people as possible, it's about education and getting information out there and putting it in places, Instagram, where it's accessible and people will come across it and pick it up. And that's where the audience is, and
Absolutely,
so that's where I'm kind of posting. And
so to everyone out there, at The Music Accountant. I'm sorry, it's actually your website as well, isn't it? It's like you've got that.
It is. I mean, the website's sort of under construction, and it's sort of early days with the website.
But I just kind of
threw something together and got it up. But yeah, it's there. Yeah.
So I just want to quickly just jump onto touring then, and we won't go into too much detail here, but obviously look, this is whether it's a DJ going around the UK and making, you know, doing a few gigs to try and build some money. I know you and I met at the BIM event recently, and there was a lovely young lady called Anna who's been touring Germany. You know, this is an area where, exactly as you say, where the money starts to be made. But at the same time, there's also a lot of expense, and that might not necessarily be someone other than hers. You know, is there any advice you give to someone, or how would you approach a tour budget, for example? And obviously, I appreciate that's once again quite broad, but is there sort of any guidance you can give on that element?
So, yeah, I mean, touring is very expensive, and it has become far more expensive post-COVID, post-Brexit. It's a real sort of burden now.
Yeah.
In fact, I was looking at the results from sort of the last few years for a client recently, and it's been sort of slashed in terms of the profit they're getting after tour is about half of what it was a few years ago.
That's crazy.
Which is tough, and it's just been eaten up by, I mean, tour buses and everything's gone up. You know, all the crew want to be paid a bit more because everyone's suffering from the cost of living.
Absolutely.
And so it's really tough. I mean, it's tough out there, basically. How would I approach budgeting for a tour? So going back to sort of something I mentioned earlier, you can have the most pristine, accurate, wonderful budget, but if there's no one really kind of taking ownership and sort of controlling that budget, and I'm not out on the road with these artists, if there's no one really taking ownership of that, then it kind of all falls apart. And then you end up in the same position you were in otherwise, which is you get to the end of the tour and you go, right, what happened? Oh, we haven't made any money. Okay.
Had a bloody good time though.
So it is critical to have someone, and it could be one of the band, or it could be the tour manager. Someone has to be involved in that process. Someone who sort of, it's a collaborative process between me and either the tour manager or the band or a bit of both, to say, okay, this is what you're going to need to spend on tour, or they're saying this is what we're going to need to spend on tour. Then we're looking and seeing if it works. And something that sort of can often get missed, or I've seen it get missed, is stuff like withholding tax. So you've got your show fees, and you think your show fees are whatever they are, right? And if you go and play in the US and then you get your show fees paid in, it's 30% less than what you thought it was going to be, because the promoters are all withholding 30% federal withholding tax. So actually, instead of getting all of it, you're basically getting 70% of it. So now, if you haven't factored that in, well, your budget and your cash flow for the tour is in trouble.
Yeah, of course.
And that 30%, that might be your profit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it might be pushing you into the red, because you might not even have been making 30% profit.
Yeah.
So There are all sorts of sort of potential pitfalls. But going back to, I suppose, the original question, the original point, it is absolutely vital that whoever's involved in the budgeting process is sort of bought into it, and there's someone you can count on that's on the road, that's there, that is keeping it in line with the budget.
Taking ownership of it, as you
exactly.
say. Yeah.
And otherwise it's a sort of a wasted exercise.
And did you think with these sort of, and actually maybe try and make the question a little broader, with the change in everything over the past, let's say 5 to 10 years, right? From, as you say, following Brexit, following COVID, the massive increase of cost for travel, for this, for that, the change in regards to the way that distribution has, we've gone from kind of pretty much left the physical and gone down to the digital. So you've got less income on that side, you've got more expenses on that side. How has that changed your approach? Now, apologies if you've not been in it long enough to answer that, but from your knowledge, how has that changed the approach of a music accountant? How has it changed a music accountant's approach, should I say, to things like budgeting and stuff like that?
I don't know that it has changed the approach that much, to be honest.
Just bigger costs and less costs, bigger and less incomes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it does mean that, it's worth kind of, I suppose, drilling into stuff a bit more and working out, where can we save any money, just because, all the margins are getting squeezed. But it is a difficult position. And it's hard to increase the number at the top. It's hard to increase the revenue, because then that's sort of a cost you're passing on to fans. And there is this kind of relationship in music between the artist and the fans, and it's almost sort of trying to play this game of not making the fans feel like you're trying to get more money out of them.
Yeah.
Which is the case.
But
unfortunately, that's kind of where the money has to come from for for the touring and the merchandise and that kind of thing. There's quite an interesting book called Rockonomics, which talks about that a lot, and it talks about the sort of the supply and demand aspect of like ticket pricing, and the fact that you have ticket touts. But what that tells you is that the price of tickets isn't high enough.
Fair.
Because if there's a secondary market, then the primary market is not expensive enough. But obviously, just making everything more expensive is incredibly unpopular with the fans, right? So, in fact, I did see something. I think it might have been on, maybe it was LinkedIn or somewhere recently. It was a comment made, I think, by the CEO of Live Nation, about the fact that you've got people paying $80,000 to go and see the New York Knicks and sit courtside, right? And so why shouldn't people be paying $80,000 to go to a concert? And it's sort of it's kind of out of touch a little bit with most of the attendees of the concert, but on a pure sort of supply and demand basis, if we're talking about economics, and we're not talking about kind of fans and art and music, if we're talking about economics, there's kind of a case there for it. And I'm not saying that, artists should be out there charging $80,000 for a ticket. I'm not saying that's right. But at the same time, if we want artists to continue being able to make music and create these experiences that we go and we love and we have and we enjoy and remember for the rest of our lives. I mean, what's the answer?
Well, there's a couple of things, because let's be honest, right? I suppose, 80,000 is a big figure, but you've only got to go to Ibiza these days. And let's be honest, the price of drinks, the VIP tables, it has changed out there. And I hate to be that guy that's like, oh, it's not the old Ibiza. I am 40. I'm allowed to say it. I was going 20 years ago. But the point is right now, the clubs were expensive for drinks back then, fine. But now they've got this big focus on the VIP experience, and it has changed. And even if you come back to, the traditional gig or concert, for example, you're now getting this spectacle. And I appreciate the point of experience. And I'll be honest, I'm happy to pay money if there is value to it. I'll give Tomorrowland their due, right? Okay, expensive ticket, but when you look at the production value,
it's incredible.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And obviously, okay, there's a lot of people there, so it all adds up. But it feels like they've tried to justify the cost at the very essence, right? But like, coming away from music slightly, I know myself personally, I went to go see Dave Chappelle do stand-up recently. And it was stand-up. There is no production. It's a spotlight, a microphone and a chair. £170. £170 for a standard.
I hope he was funny.
It wasn't what I expected.
He's going to have to be funny for 170 quid.
Well, it was funny. It was funny, but it wasn't what I expected. But also you've now also got the political, and I'd come back to music and just kind of piggybacking off something you mentioned a second ago about the tax in America and receiving 30% less. How is this? And I hate to do this, and this isn't what this show is about. The political element with Trump stepping in and adding tariffs and things like that. Genuinely, how is that actually affecting things like tour in the US right now? Actually, sorry to pipe in on my own question, but I actually saw, funny enough, on LinkedIn, I think it was a band called Flight or something like that. They've just had their visa turned down or something like because of they're an artist. Or I didn't go into great detail. I just skimmed across it. But anyway, coming back to the question, how is the political world sort of kind of affecting touring and things like that in a minute?
I haven't seen any direct impacts yet. I would expect that it will have some impact, mostly on the visa side of things. America has become very hot on all of the visas, it seems.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I literally saw that post today where they'd been touring the US for God knows how long, which tried to go back and they got turned away.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the reality of it. Like I said, I haven't seen any of it sort of firsthand, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are more sort of instances of that happening.
Well, maybe that's a good segue to sort of kind of getting on towards the last segment of the show today. How do you see money in this industry evolving? And really to give some context, we've already spoken a second ago about how income streams have changed substantially, whether it's through distribution, no longer selling CDs, vinyl tapes. It's all this streaming service, which naturally is very, very different in regards to income. You're now getting this new source of income through social media and stuff. How do you see things changing in the foreseeable future? If at all.
How do I see them changing? Good question. I think live is going to remain sort of at the forefront in terms of where the artist is going to earn. I don't think live is going anywhere. I think if anything, it will become more important because I think what we are seeing broadly now is kind of everybody got really sucked in by social media, and it's kind of left people, I think, feeling disconnected, and it was it was kind of building. The internet and social media was billed as this great connector, and I don't think it has been really. There are obviously in some instances where it has, and so I think live and the connection to that, I think, is going to become even more important and more valued and more valuable. I expect we'll see ticket prices going up.
Yeah, of course.
Up and up.
Yeah.
But like I said, from a purely economic point of view, if there's anyone reselling tickets, well then there's obviously we haven't hit the ceiling.
Yeah, of
so
course.
Unfortunately that's where we're at. But I think I don't really know where this is going, but giving it a bit of thought. But I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't really know. I think a continuation probably of the tendency for artists to want to be independent, but I don't think we can get away from the reality that the major labels provide such a marketing power that they still serve a purpose, and there is still an appeal of signing to a label and getting that kind of big big kind of like made it sort of experience, you know?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, there are so many sort of other opportunities as well.
Well, one of the things we haven't just spoke about today is things like sync, right? Obviously, let's be honest.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, look at so GTA, I think the myth that is GTA 6. God knows when it's coming out. But like, they're now building their own sort of in-game currency. You've also seen Tomorrowland do things. To be honest, you only got to go to any festival and they've got some sort of tokenization, right? But then you've also seen companies like Dice who are now doing a full embedded finance product in some of their things that they're doing. You know, they've really sort of kind of, especially during COVID and now, we're trying to build this sort of kind of virtual live experience where, okay, you might have people in a club, but also at the same time we're streaming it, but you've got to pay that pay-per-view thing. Are these some of the areas that you're thinking are coming through and are good areas to maybe focus on? Maybe to change the question slightly. If you were a brand new artist but wanted to make serious money, where would you go? Where is that pot of gold?
Oh, where would I go? I think if I was a brand new artist, I think I would focus on writing and making music.
Okay.
I think you have to start there.
So the essence is still basically.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's refining your craft and getting in touch with emotions and putting that into the music and figuring out how you put it into the music, because I think that some of the most successful songwriters and artists are the ones who've done that, the ones who've written songs that really resonate with a lot of people. And I think that's where it starts. It starts with the art, it starts with the creation, it starts with the music making. And if you write great songs, then I think you're
fingers crossed.
That's it. Build it and they will come.
Build a tree. Great film.
You need some people to open some doors and get you some opportunities. Absolutely. That's where the manager comes in. That's where the team and the network comes in. But I think it has to start with the music. Yeah. And it has to start with the music that resonates with and connects with the fans, and then on the social media connecting with the fans and this creating this sort of community, because then you have kind of an army that will follow you anywhere and will pay to see you and buy all your merch and buy all your songs and all this kind of thing. But it starts with the music. Because without that, what have you got?
You haven't
got anything.
Person on a phone, right, trying to do social media.
If you've got no music, all you've got is an album cover.
There's
nothing to it, right?
Designer, is it?
So, yeah.
Do you? Sorry, mate. A last question. I may have bounced about here, so apologies for that. Do you think there's anything wrong in the way that finance in the music industry is? And I know that's a very I'm not quite too sure I've asked the right question.
I sort of think. Well, I've got my interpretation of the question.
That'll do.
So I think what's wrong or one of the major problems is, again, just coming back to this idea of the kind of gap between someone who sort of starts making music in their bedroom and then getting to the point of being kind of an established artist, in the sense of, they're not making hundreds of thousands, but they're making enough that it's, they're doing music full time as a living and they're making all right money from it. And it's a big gap, right? And the thing is that, in there, I mentioned sort of the team and the importance of the team, but this artist can't afford to pay the team yet.
Yeah, fair.
So I think that's a challenge. And I know for a lot of managers now, the job of the manager is incredibly difficult, because they're tasked with doing more and more and more, and until the artist is making money, the manager's not making any money. So it's, how does the manager sort of work with artists who aren't making any money? And obviously they have to have a sort of a roster and so on, and maybe do other things and whatever. But there's a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of investment into an artist in the with the expectation that they're going to get to a certain point. And I think that's one of the major challenges is is getting them to that point. And it's a challenge for the artists. It's a challenge for sort of the team, the ecosystem around them. But yeah, no. So I think the something that's wrong with it, or the problem is like I said, there's this gap, and it's about, and I mean one of the challenges I have seen with artists is when an artist sort of breaks, if you like, and everybody knows about them. I think there's this kind of misunderstanding that they've suddenly come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But actually,
the overnight win, right?
The overnight success.
Yeah,
and that does happen. It obviously is going to happen more with social media, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that they've probably been at it for 10 years.
Maybe
15 years.
Yeah, of course.
They've been sort of penniless and broke and playing gigs to 10 people in the beginning. Maybe not even 10 people, right?
Yeah.
And so, they've really been on a journey. And how do you make sure that they're able to go for 10 years or 15 years to the point where they actually get they get the success, they get the momentum, they get the break? Because if they run out of money before that, well, then they might never get that far.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's the biggest problem, and the problem that I hope to try and address and solve and reduce. Because I want as many artists who have the potential to get to be a huge global artist. Yeah. I want them to get there.
Amazing.
And they all start just in their bedroom or wherever, and how do you get them there? And
they go on Instagram, search at the music accountant, and watch your videos, and that's how they learn how to budget and do their thing.
But yeah, I think the education is on that side of things is where I feel I can kind of contribute and sort of reach the most people and have kind of an impact in that sense. And it means that the world gets to hear whatever it is they're doing, and they get to sort of live out their dream of doing this thing that they love and they're talented at, and so on.
It's incredibly sad to think of the amount of who might have been but weren't because of money issues. Had to go and get another job, or to support family.
Yeah, exactly. That's
a really sad thing.
That's how it goes. It's the whole time. The thing that doesn't ever stop is time, right? And so you can start doing this when you're 15, but then 10 years later you're 25, and then things are kind of changing a little bit. And if you stick another 5 years on, well then what's happening?
Like you're 30, living at home with your mum and dad.
Maybe. And then I think it can become very become very difficult then, because then people then start kind of reevaluating and thinking like, what am I doing? Have I am I gonna make it? And it's sometimes it's just maybe they just need to keep going a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But it needs to be financially viable for them. And I've worked with artists who've bands who've sort of members of kind of event gradually dropped out because they've had to go and get a normal job and that kind of thing, and they're getting a bit older and they don't want to be on the road sleeping in a bus with 5 other blokes and whatever. So I think trying to create as much sort of sustainability in on a financial basis as possible, so an artist can basically take it as far as they want to take it. And I think that's really important.
Fair. I want to make sure I get this question across correctly, because obviously it's one of those things where the time frame of having success is anyone's guess, right? Is there like a cheat mode or anything like that for not to make money, but to learn how to not spend, to live within your means? Is there, because let's be honest, right? If let's say, for example, you are a bit of a career changer, or, you've decided to take that jump, and let's say you did have, I'll take myself, for example, right? And even yourself leaving Pel and setting up Phoenix, you're earning well, you've got money, you've got a life that you have become comfortable with, you're living within your means, and then suddenly you're throwing yourself into this world where it's not the same anymore. And obviously, as I say, even looking yourself, starting up your own business, myself, one day, hopefully this will, I'd love this to be my thing, and there's going to be a point where I go to my finance job, 2 fingers, I'm off, see you later, I'm going to go to music. And then suddenly that that transition, you know, is there anything, what would be your advice to someone in that transition? You know, they've got their budget, but actually having that discipline, you know, sticking to it, having the perseverance for not being able to spend money for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. That's a tricky one. I think that's why having some goals in place is really important. Absolutely, because then you can kind of refer back to that and use that as your measuring stick.
For a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I think it's important that you don't sort of restrict yourself or deny yourself of too many of the things you want or enjoy. Just Absolutely, you know, I would have sort of exactly the same conversation with a personal training client who's wanting to lose weight. Like, how do they not just eat everything they want to eat, right?
And it's sorry. I was just going to say, I suppose it's taking something that you might have done every day and maybe turn it into a reward, like once a month, for example, rather than getting takeaway every day. And it kind of works the same for the artist and the fat person. Let's be honest. Don't get a takeaway every night. Only get it once a month as a reward.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at, okay, you know, what have I got to spend? What do I want to budget? How much do I want to put, you know, set aside for savings or investments and so on? And then seeing what you've got to work with. And I think beyond that, but seeing how that makes you feel. And, you know, if it makes you feel good, well, then great. And if it makes you feel not so good, be like, okay, well, what do I need to change so that it feels good? And, you know, obviously there might be periods in your career, in your life, where you have to, you know, sort of, you know, tighten your buckle a little bit and so on. Yeah. But, you know, if you have a goal at the end of it and you can kind of focus on what the goal is and why you're doing it, and that's the key thing, it's the why again, then I think that's really important and allows you to stay sort of focused and stay on track.
Love it.
I think as an extension of that, if you find yourself drifting from the track, it's about getting back on it, but also not chastising yourself for kind of drifting, and then maybe assessing, okay, well, why did I do that? Maybe it's because the sort of the path I've chosen is too restrictive or too extreme or whatever, and, you know, adjusting it a little bit so it's more sustainable. And I think sustainability is really important.
Love it. I appreciate it. So currently coming on to our last part of the show then, I think we've provided as much advice as we can give, unless there's anything you think I've missed. But what I'd like to do is just actually take something you just said a second ago, and it's just like take them moments in life where you are being self-aware and trying to, you know, reflect, let's say. Is there anything, looking back on your career and everything you've done, is there anything that you would have changed or a lesson that you've learned for, you know, to get where you have, or, you know, whatever it might be, just something that, you know, in your journey that's really sort of stood out to you as a bit of a learning lesson?
It's an interesting one, that, and it's something I've sort of thought about a little bit, which I don't know that I would change that much about it, because I think, you know, while you could say, oh, well, if you knew you wanted to be an accountant in music, you could have done that at 21 or whatever, instead of going and, you know, becoming a PT and doing whatever else and so on. But actually there was so much I sort of learnt as a personal trainer and kind of reflection and development and this sort of stuff in that I think gives me quite a unique skill set versus other accountants now, that I wouldn't want to change that. Okay. I think if there was anything, maybe I would start Phoenix a bit earlier. Okay. Yeah. And I would sort of take that plunge a little bit earlier, rather than thinking like, you know, umming and ahhing about it and thinking.
Just very quickly on that note, I know there was one thing you actually specifically asked me to do, and that was to give a shout out to Anne Harrison.
Anne Harrison. Well, no. So Anne Harrison is you know, sort of opened the door for me. I would say, and, you know, through that door was Steve and Pel, and I think you know, I sort of owe them both really a kind of a debt of gratitude, because without their help, you know, without Anne opening the door and without Stephen, like I said, taking a punt on a personal trainer, when you know, I went and spoke to a couple of the other kind of music accountants. Again, you know, sort of kind introductions from Anne, and the 5 years of being a personal trainer was a bit of an obstacle, because I remember doing an assessment at one of the accountants, one of the music accountants, and I couldn't remember most of the stuff.
Really?
As in, it was like a skills test, and it was asking about VAT, and I was like, it all looks familiar, but it's been 5 years since I've done any of this. I don't really know what to do with it, and so that that didn't go that well. So like I said, sort of very grateful for Anne for kind of opening the doors and so on, and introducing me to Stephen, and then obviously Stephen for like I said, taking a chance on a personal trainer, and it all worked out pretty well.
And now even I owe Anne Harrison a little thank you, because otherwise you wouldn't have been where you are. You wouldn't be on the show. We wouldn't be teaching all these artists how to look after them.
Yeah. But actually, you mentioned earlier on, you asked about anything anyone could do to learn about sort of the music business and so on. Anne Harrison has written the book on the music business. It's called Music, the Business.
Love it.
It's in its 9th edition, and I think you'll struggle to find a better resource for learning about the music industry than that book.
I'll put it straight to camera. People out there, Anne Harrison, Music, the Business, 9th edition, go get it. So big up from Mark Milsted.
It is indeed.
Love it. So Mark, so the last question then, really, and it's something I love to ask all of my guests, unless there's anything else that you think the people out there might want to know regarding finance. I think we've covered pretty much. I think we've covered quite a bit.
The one take home. Take home. Set up a separate bank account. Honestly, I cannot say that enough.
I love that. So basically, the first thing we said is the thing that was most important.
That's the most important.
Don't bother watching the rest of the podcast. It's all useless. It's all good.
So I've got a sort of, I've put together like a hierarchy, a pyramid of sort of a blueprint for kind of finance, like a simple kind of blueprint. And at the very bottom, the bottom stone is a separate bank account. Because that's the absolute first thing that you should do. As soon as you start getting paid for anything, and it doesn't matter if it's music or whatever else it is, not obviously if it's like a job, like an employed job, that can go in your personal bank account. But if you're doing something else, freelancing or whatever.
Your side hustle.
Side hustle, separate bank account, start there, and it will make everything easier.
Fair.
So.
I like that. So then there it is then. So last question, my good man. 100 years' time, people look back and think the name Mark Milsted.
Yeah.
What do you want to be remembered for? Or what do you want them to think when they say your name?
What I want to be remembered for?
A load of money.
Excuse me. What do I want to be remembered for in 100 years? So I would like to have had the impact that I want to have in terms of, like I said, bridging that gap between the new artist and the sort of the established artist who's into their career, and facilitated, I guess, as many artists getting to that point as possible. And obviously I can only work directly with so many.
Cool.
So it's through things like social media and stuff that I hope to try and educate educate the masses effectively and get that information out there. I think historically there's been quite a bit of sort of gatekeeping of some of this stuff, some of this information by accountants. And I don't know if it's sort of intentional or what, but I plan to not gatekeep anything and get the information out there, let people have it, let them do whatever they want with it. I think maybe sometimes people see that as sort of a threat. Oh, if I give away all my secrets, then they won't need me. No, they still will. I've been doing it for 10 years. I will still be needed and needed for other things. But there's all sorts of stuff that other people can do for themselves, by themselves. They just need the information. Absolutely. And they need it somewhere where they can receive it and take it away and put it into place. So
there we go. The final thing, Mark Milsted, the transparent music accountant.
I try. Yeah.
Well, buddy, thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Wish you well. Take care.
Appreciate it.
A huge thanks to Mark today for breaking down what a music accountant actually does and providing some real solid practical advice for all you musicians out there trying to build a sustainable future. I really appreciate you listening today. And once again, if you've enjoyed the show, please be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone you feel it might be beneficial to. Thanks for listening. I'm Ben Davenport, and I'll see you next time on Beats Learning.